decided I'd take a look at it. Well, I'm already not looking forward to it from this. Well, we'll see how true to this perspective they are, but it looks like it's a union report. Well, that's the premise, it looks like. Looking at it, and not from the perspective of itself. So we'll start at the government type, since the rest isn't that important, I don't think. So it's a federal elective monarchy with cameral legislature made up, the baronies' core worlds called the Baronic Concern, the front line of the Baronic expansion. The Dawnline Shore, on the other hand, is known to Karrakins as the Baronic Interest. Okay, so that's because we did read the Rim one. I forget the name of it, but the Dawnline Shore was which if they did a book on the Dawnline Shore, maybe I'd pick that up. It was kind of from the other side. It was like the last region you passed through before reaching the Dawnline Shore. So we're looking at that region again, except from the other side. Union's capital world, Cradle, is known to Karrakins as Earth. They considered the planet Caracas to be the cultural center of the galaxy and the capital of humankind, not Earth. Cradle is recognized as the birthplace of humanity, but Karrakins consider the mass exodus during the fall to mark the end of Earth's claim to humanity's heart. I'm not going to read through the houses. I'm sure we'll get more context for them later. When speaking of the people of the Karrakin trade baronies, there are numerous social codes, titles, and demonyms to hold in mind. Generally speaking, citizens and subjects of the major houses, whether in concern or the interest, can be called Karrakin by those from Union, other states, and so on. That said, although Karrakin may be acceptable shorthand for someone from the baronies, that person would likely express their desire to be called by the demonym relevant to their homeworld. Particularities of social status at another level of complexity, members of the baronies' noble classes tend to insist on proper address from subjects and citizens when interacting with outsiders. Desire for exactitude in address is a spectrum. Some nobles demand strict adherence to protocol and will take pains to have their staff inform any potential audiences of those protocols, while others may accept recognition in the form of a simple lord or similar. Norum. Periods of Karrakin history are organized by a Norum. Norum are a Karrakin form of dynastic fate-sourced absolute monarchy best imagined as an imperial arrangement. The concept implies a certain state of thought, being, and myth. In addition to the era and form of rule, a Norum can extend far beyond the reign of a single ruler, though they are often thought of as being instigated or torn into being by the actions of a particular fated person. Norm can be used in a different context as a political equivalent to empire, or even reference to the ruling family. Norm's leader is an Anno, though emperor is often used and understood. And they're still using the Union time frame. What is Caracas? How to begin to describe that old throne? One could start by writing all of human history prior to the fall in a single book and giving that book a single name. Is Caracas today the same as its founding colony? Is Caracas the Anorum Paschaligia or the Anorum Tyrannus? Is it the new federation or is it the baronies? To those who hate her, Caracas is a wheezing crone, shambling towards an end, in teeth and blood. To those who love her, she is a mighty Amazon, unblemished and undaunted. The truth is that Caracas is immune to the damnation of the partisan and undeserving of the praises of the worshipper. She is both crone and Amazon. She stands alone in human history, for better or worse, and defines the arc of our species as both lodestone and diadem. Begin here, Caracas is a name older than any human civilization that ever lived and died on Earth, older than the great pharaohs of Egypt, the emperors of old China, the senators of Rome, the Khans of Mongolia, the Shahs of Persia, and every president and prime minister. Against union, Caracas is a captivating mirror. The two great powers of humankind are fascinated with one another, scale notwithstanding. Others may try to intercede, their mutual embrace is ultimately unbreakable. Where one goes, the other will follow. Union and Caracas will live together or die by mutual compact. The Karrakin Trade Baronies is a member state of Union that considers itself both the cultural heart of humanity and its modern-day capital, boasting an unbroken millennia-long history from their foundation to the present day, billions of souls under their banner and dozens of worlds under their command. The Krakens are a mirror to Union, if not in size, then certainly in their impact on the course of human history. Caracas was seeded by the first of the 10, the Apollo, a Titanic generation ship launched pre-fall. The millennia that have passed since then have seen a wealth of mythology and legends, rising kingdoms, crumbling empires, civil wars, and interstellar conflict. This is a culture that has weathered the weight of history. Now it faces an uncertain future. The barony's unbroken history is a rarity among galactic states. However, unlike people of the Aun Ecumene, and that was my one great disappointment, and probably the only other thing that would bring me back to Lancer is if they did cover the Aun, because it got very little coverage in the core book, but the Aun were, to me, one of the more interesting concepts of a faction. Regard Cradle as their long-lost homeworld, most Karrakins do not hold Cradle in that same regard. Instead, Caracas, the barony's first world, occupies that venerated position in their cultural mythology. Cradle is simply recognized as the origin of the species, not a homeland to be reclaimed or longed for. Other than scholars, diplomats, and a few travelers, few Krakens have an interest in Earth, let alone a desire to visit it. The leaders of the baronies do not seek to rule Union directly, though they do maintain a representative presence on the Central Committee. Instead, they vie for control over Karrakin itself and seek new worlds to add glory to her name. To sit steward upon the Anarim dais on Karrakin is to mark yourself the figurative lord of humanity, a chain unbroken since humans first stepped out from Olduvai. Though the goal of the barons will always be control of the Anarim dais, theirs is not an entirely insular culture. The houses of the baronies pursue interstellar objectives and mount colonial expeditions, race house companies, and participate in union politics for varying reasons, some for gold, some for glory, some for adventure, and some who see interstellar ventures as a unique angle back into Karrakin politics. For all time, the history of the Karrakin people stretches back before the fall to the present day, developing in parallel to and divergent from Union for thousands of years under the assumption that Karrakin alone had survived the fall. Recontact occurred under Union's first committee, but if it had not been for the Demos event and Union's meteoric technological ascendancy, Karrakin would have been the seat of humanity's power. Unencumbered by the trauma of the fall, the colony of Karrakin flourished, and for thousands of years its people enjoyed a linear development. By the time of first contact with Union, the Karrakins had made landfall on nearby worlds. By the time of the Deimos event, they had developed mass industries and megastructural engineering. Their people had spread out over numerous terrestrial worlds and moons. There was friction under the Second Committee. It brings significant resistance to integration from the Krakens, which indeed took place. The Second Committee sent a fleet before its diplomats. The war between the Karrakin peoples and unions was short. Bolstered by technological advancements guaranteed via the Deimos event, the Union Navy smashed aside their Karrakin opponents and secured a surrender. Their fleet eliminated, facing Union's singular control over paracausal entities and technology and burdened with a Baroque monarchy hamstrung by conventional interstellar communications and transportation, the Krakens took the unprecedented step of ceding galactic sovereignty to Union. In exchange, Caracas became the raw heart of Union's industrial base, providing the unquestioned galactic hegemon with a vast boon of resources and extraction techniques that ensured Cradle and her colonies by extension. The rest of the core worlds in the galaxy never wanted for any material good. The fractured and international nobility suddenly united by the blink and the Omninet chose not to demand rule over the galaxy but to fund the people who did. In time, their economic sway became inexorable from Union's galactic dominion. It is a grim truth of Union, an uncomfortable source of tension among the center party coalitions that sit the Central Committee, that without Caracas, Union as we know it today would not exist. Now, however, all signs point towards the balance of power shifting away from this arrangement. The rich vein that was the baronic concern, the core worlds of the baronies and their rulers, the major houses, is running dry. The worlds of the concern choke under the demands of populations in the billions and tens of billions, and the resources that the barons were once so readily able to provide to Union's core worlds are eaten up first by their own. A crown that thought itself inured to political upheaval, with its millennia of rising and crumbling empires of states born from and returned to the ashes, is now struck to the core by a rising tide of republicanism. Familiar to the rest of the galaxy, but anathema to the most conservative baronic factions, the demands of the baronic citoyens. I don't know. I mean, because other Lancer products have been rife with typos. I want to say that's a typo, but that could just be them trying to make up a word. To be recognized, not as noble or ignoble, but equal and deserving of the right to self rule, is spreading among all classes. Burdened by a hungry and increasingly restless population, the baronies' ruling classes have turned towards a fertile clutch of unusually research rich worlds, the Dawnline Shore, the Baronic interest, where they meet not only long settled indigenous populations seated under the First Committee, but a swaggering Harrison armory hungry to expand its territory. The slow but inevitable crisis grows steadily more intense and threatens to plunge all the baronies into an untold era of conflict. Union's Third Committee, haunted by its past and unwilling to repeat the dire mistakes of its predecessor, treads with the lightest step possible. It remains to be seen if the throne can be remade anew or if it will crack and break from the pressure. The future of the baronies, once immutable, in the noble and ignoble mind both, is now uncertain. The great wheel Dis has come rolling back around. The center is crumbling, and what happens next is unknown. The future, as the haruspices, oracles, and augurs on old Karrakin would tell you, is for the taking. Long deep. 6,000. Actually, it's a bit early, but I feel like this would be better if we tackled it in one sitting. So we'll go ahead and end here.